Chapter 3000. Oh. Everyone reflexively glanced in Holy Sun Mi Yan's direction. This Sir Holy Sun had been unperturbed since the beginning, as if he was waiting for someone to arrive. Could it be that the temple had sent an even more formidable expert aside from this Holy Sun? While everyone was thinking this, they vaguely heard the elegant sound of wind music drifting into their ears from afar. When they looked up, they saw a sky full of flowers drifting down. 4 to 5 young women in white muslin slowly descended from the sky while surrounding a young lady in white clothes with her skirt fluttering in the wind, as if a celestial maiden descending to the mortal world. Abba glanced at them and couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Every time that Holy Daughter appeared, she would always have people scatter flowers to welcome her respectfully. However, there wasn't such a grand display today. There were only 4 to 5 young girls flying around her with their own petals and halos. Compared to the first time they met in the imperial capital, when she was surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people, this was indeed a scene that paled in comparison to the first time. Greetings to Holy Daughter. Everyone from the temple bowed in greeting. Holy Sun Mi Yan glanced at Nye Yaoguang apathetically and nodded at her. Yaoguang, have the people from the other 3 academies all arrived? Holy Daughter Nye Yaoguang stepped forward and bowed slightly toward Holy Sun Mi Yan. She nodded and said, "The people from Flying Sword Academy, Hong Estate, and Blue Ocean Academy have all arrived." "Go count the number of people." Holy Sun Mi Yan said indifferently, "If everyone is here, then we'll set off." Nye Yaoguang nodded. From beginning to end, she looked straight ahead and didn't shift her gaze even half an inch toward Abba. She didn't know if it was because she was scared by the little stoic's previous beating or if she really didn't want to pay attention to her, but she completely ignored the stoic face. Since she ignored Abba naturally wouldn't take the initiative to pay attention to her. Seeing that Holy Daughter Nye Yaoguang led people to the side to count the number of people, Miss Chow stood to the side and waited calmly. Before long, Nye Yaoguang returned to the Holy Sun's side and nodded at that person. "Everyone is basically here, except for Madame Gua and a few others who haven't. Sorry, I'm late." A voice suddenly interrupted Nye Yaoguang's words. Immediately after, everyone saw a plump lady with a black veil covering her face, leading a burly man and an old man with a black beard forward. Abba recognized that sturdy man. He was precisely the one he had encountered in the small courtyard that day when he rescued 5th young Master Qin. The black-bearded old man had a pair of dignified tiger eyes. Abba had never seen him before. The old man's cultivation seemed to be quite high, but he couldn't tell what realm he was in at a glance. When Madame Goen walked up to the Holy Sun, she finally saw clearly that the little stoic was standing to the side. Madame's face immediately darkened. Without saying a word, she summoned a spiritual weapon from her mind and threw it at the expressionless Sir Jojo. This D****Ned little stoic, she'd used a spirit weapon this time. Let's see how she dodged it. Abba stretched out his hand and pushed out a circular ripple-shaped pattern, directly using the water spirit to imprison the spirit weapon Madame had thrown inside. The friction between the air currents produced a series of clattering sounds. For a moment, that spirit weapon was immobilized inside the water spirit circle and couldn't break through that circle's barrier no matter how hard it tried. Madame Goen's face immediately darkened to the extreme. She clenched her teeth and activated the spirit weapon in her hand, wishing for nothing more than to slit a large hole in the little stoic's neck on the spot. It would be best if she could be taught a lesson on the spot. Chapter 3001. Bang! Prince Mo slightly narrows his eyes. With a light flick of his sleeve, the spiritual weapon sent over by Madame Goen is quickly pushed away. Unable to withstand the gravity, that spiritual weapon suddenly flies backwards. With a chi sound, it passes through several trees before finally collapsing high up in the sky. A perfectly good spiritual weapon has actually turned into a piece of scrap metal in an instant, falling to the ground with a dong-dong sound. Madame Goen is so angry that her eyes turn red. Emolien. This guy is simply too infuriating. Does he even put this aunt of mine in his eyes? In broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of so many people, he actually acted so recklessly. Most importantly, he completely destroyed the spiritual weapon that she had painstakingly taken out. Madame Gowan looks at the spiritual weapon lying on the ground, which has already lost its radiance. She inwardly grinds her teeth in anger. Emolienne coldly glances at her. Gowan, this crown prince has given you face. Don't be ungrateful. Madame Gowan's face immediately turns deathly pale from anger. Seeing this, Holy Sun Mi Yen hurriedly steps forward and stops Madame Gowan. Since Madame Gowan has already arrived, then let's set off. Madam? Holy Sun Mi Yen slightly shakes his head at Madame Gowan. His meaning is very obvious. He wants her to quickly calm down, lest she really suffers a big loss. Madame Gowan immediately calms down slowly. Looking at Prince Emo and Arbor in front of her, and then glancing at the unfriendly crowd beside the two of them, Madame Gowan takes a deep breath and slowly lets go of her killing intent. She indifferently says, "Then let's set off." Bang! Suddenly, a ball of divine power bounces in front of Madame Gowan at a speed comparable to light. Madame Gowan didn't notice what happened at first, but when she clearly sees that it's a ball of divine power that has jumped in front of her, her expression suddenly changes greatly. And an old man beside her slightly waves his hands, pushing Madame Gowan behind him. A powerful defensive force erupts from his body, fiercely catching the power of the ball of divine power. When the two collided, the old man's face turned slightly pale. He stood straight in front of Madame Gowan and retreated 3 or 4 steps. Under the protection of the short-bearded old man, Madame Gowan passed through safely, but her face was a little pale from anger, and her chest couldn't help but jump up and down because of this sudden accident. She took a deep breath, her gaze seemingly dipped in poison as she glared at Xiao Mu. The Crown Prince consort is too audacious. This damned girl actually threw a ball of divine power at her without saying a word. If Mr. Zhao wasn't here today, the National Security Agency would definitely suffer a great loss. The little Crown Princess looked at her coldly. Suddenly, she waved her hand, and the startled swan dagger, which was hidden in the air, suddenly attacked Madame Guo's neck. No sooner said than done. At that critical moment, the black-bearded old man, Mr. Zhao, pushed Madame Gowan behind him, and summoned an extremely powerful water spirit energy with one hand. In an instant, the startled swan dagger that was flying over was sealed in a block of ice by this Mr. Zhao. It couldn't stop trembling, and was actually unable to break out of the ice block's encirclement in a short period of time. Emolienne frowned slightly. She raised her finger and a flame rushed over, directly burning the block of ice that was wrapped around the startled swan dagger. After burning for less than a minute, that block of ice suddenly cracked, and the startled swan dagger jumped out. With an even faster speed, it flew towards Madame Gowan's neck. Chapter 3002. Rip. There was a light sound. Madame Gowan only felt a slight chill on her neck. When she touched it with her hand, she discovered that the little stoic's startled swan dagger had cut a long gash on her neck. The little stoic stood outside the crowd like this and coldly looked at her. She said indifferently, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." For some reason, Madame Gowan's heart suddenly chilled. She only felt that the little girl in front of her was sinister and vengeful, simply not like a normal little girl. No, she couldn't be this impulsive. This little stoic didn't seem to have a high cultivation, but when it came to actual combat, her abilities were much higher than hers. She had to carefully plan before continuing to attack. Otherwise, she would be tricked every time. Just thinking about it made her extremely unwilling. When Madame Gowan thought of this, she took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions with all her might, returning to tranquility. Holy Sun Mi Yen pressed his aching head and hastily stepped forward. He stood between the stoic face and Madame Gowan and said in a low voice, "All right. Don't make a fuss about anything. Now that everyone is here, we'll leave through the transportation portal. Let's go to the nearest three-river pier to board a boat first." Since the Holy Sun said this, the others naturally nodded in agreement and clustered around him as they walked towards the transportation portal. There were several transportation portals in this great north-facing forest. This forest was truly too large, so transportation portals had been set up in all directions. This greatly facilitated the people who came here to experience the world. Holy Sun Mi Yen led everyone directly to the great north-facing forest from this transportation portal, near the three-river pier. The people who walked out of the tactical matrix followed behind Holy Sun Mayan. After looking around for a while, they followed Holy Sun Mayan and walked towards the Sanjiang Wharf. This place wasn't far from the Three River Pier, and it was less than a 10-minute walk. From afar, they could see boats coming and going at the pier. The boatmen were busy loading and unloading goods, and it was bustling with activity. Aber followed not far behind Holy Sun Mi Yen. As he pulled Emol Yen along, he couldn't resist looking around curiously. There were at least 200 to 300 people in their group, so it was impossible to say that they weren't eye-catching. They suddenly walked over from the direction of the teleportation formation, which immediately attracted the attention of many young men on the pier. "The boatman we contacted is just ahead," Holy Sun Mi Yen said indifferently. "Follow me." Holy Sun Mi Yen had already chartered a boat and agreed on the return time with the boatman. Therefore, he easily found the boatman that he had made an appointment with. Not long after everyone boarded the ship, the two-storied ship began to move forward slowly. Holy Sun Mi Yen sent someone to inform everyone, "We will be able to enter Du Chuanjiang's range in about a day. After entering the Du Chunjiang, be careful. This is a no-fly zone. If you force your way into the air, you'll have to bear the consequences." Their days were finally stable, and the little stoic finally had time to catch up with Situ Yi and the others. She introduced Qi Xianxian and the others to them. Liang Qingqing said excitedly, "We have been stifled in the fire refining city for a long time. It was not easy for the Sun Moon Temple to select people to enter the secret realm to gain experience, so we volunteered to come. But I didn't expect to meet little junior sister here. Sk, now that I think about it, everything is really guided by fate." Situ Yi also couldn't resist chuckling. What junior sister Liang says is very reasonable. The next morning, a boatman came and banged on the door vigorously. "Sir Holy Sun is calling for everyone to come out quickly." Chapter 3003. When Aber and Emol Yen walked to the deck hand in hand, they saw a sea of heads. Everyone was standing still on the deck. Holy Sun Mi Yen was standing at the front, gazing at the distant riverbank. The ship only needs to stop at 10 Mile Pier to pick up 2 experts. Holy Sun Mi Yen said to everyone, "Up ahead is Dukhun Riverbank. The people of Spring City should be conducting a large-scale sacrificial ceremony. There are a lot of people, so don't disembark if you can." Holy Sun Mi Yen coughed lightly and said, "Those who really can't hold back and want to watch the show, don't go too far after disembarking. After we pick up the people, we'll set off immediately in about 2 hours. Don't leave yourselves behind at that time." After saying that, he deliberately found the little stoic in the crowd and looked her up and down. Thereupon, the priests next to Holy Sun Mi Yen, as well as some students from the Royal Academy, all looked at the little stoic in unison. The stoic face didn't have the slightest expression, but Sir Jojo's heart was galloping. What's going on? Is there something wrong with Holy Sun Mi Yan's eyesight? Why did he deliberately sweep his gaze over and focus on Sir Jojo? It's as if this sir is stirring up trouble everywhere. This sir is clearly very easy to talk to. Liang Qingqing and the others couldn't resist covering their mouths and snickering. "Since we're stopping for 2 hours, and it looks quite lively up ahead, Jojo, how about we disembark and take a stroll?" Sir Jojo's large eyes were spirited as he looked around. He coughed lightly and said with a reluctant expression, "Since you guys want to disembark and take a look so much, then I'll accompany you guys for a stroll." Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. "You say it like you're reluctant, but you're actually very excited on the inside." Spring City's large-scale sacrificial ceremony was currently in full swing. Many young men and women crowded around the riverbank with offerings on their heads. It was a noisy and boisterous scene. The elder in charge of the sacrificial ceremony was a cyan-robed elder. He held a long staff and muttered a long string of words. Soon after, he shouted in a clear voice, "Let the sacrificial ceremony begin." Woo, woo. The heavy sound of drums was played, accompanied by the roars of 2 rows of bare-chested brawny men, which sounded very rhythmically. Aber's group landed on the riverbank, but they didn't squeeze into the crowd. Instead, they walked around the stalls along the riverbank. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but whisper, "Are they holding an early spring ceremony?" The little stoic naturally wouldn't care about their sacrificial offerings. Everyone was in a good mood today. Whenever they saw something delicious or fun, they wanted to buy it. This was especially true for Spring City's local specialty, soy sauce pork ribs. Qi Xianxian, this glutton, tasted it and felt that it was very good. Thus, she bought a lot of it and distributed it to everyone. As the group strolled around, they heard the drumming of the sacrificial ceremony becoming more and more urgent. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a heart-wrenching cry. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound. A group of muscular men with bare arms carried trays of sacrificial offerings forward. Although the crowd was crowded, they still maintained order. When the muscular men walked past, everyone moved to the sides, leaving a path in the middle that could accommodate two people walking side by side. At this time, Qi Xianxian and the others saw that 3 animals, 5 grains, and all kinds of rare and exotic fruits were arranged on the offering trays like flowing water. The cry came from the crowd. An old woman staggered forward with the sacrificial procession and reached out several times, wanting to grab the offering trays. Unfortunately, she was short and couldn't reach the large trays that the muscular men were carrying over their heads. Chapter 3004. Arbor and the rest saw from afar that there was a young girl tied up on the tray. She was kneeling there with an ashen face and a depressed look in her eyes. The old woman cried along with the group, mournfully calling out the young girl's name. However, even if she screamed until her throat was hoarse, no one would pay attention to her. Seeing this, little Fatty's spirit was shaken. He rubbed his fists and shouted, "I'll go over and find out what happened." His reputation of being a nosy person was not for nothing. In less than 10 minutes, little Fatty squeezed out of the crowd. With a sigh, he said to Arbor, Qi Xianxian and the rest, "Do you know? Today, they are worshipping the immortals in the river. They have prepared so many resources and are planning to throw them all into the Du Chun River when the auspicious time arrives. However, in recent years, there has been a bad habit in Spring City. Every other year, they will use living women who are 25 years old and have not yet married as sacrifices." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Liang Qingqing could not help but shiver. She cursed in her heart and said, "What? Are they discriminating against older unmarried girls?" She, Liang Qingqing, was 21 years old this year. According to the rules of Spring City, she would be in danger in 4 years. She might even become a sacrifice for the immortals in the river. Lord Qiao Qiao blinked her eyes and looked at the little fatty curiously. The city is so big, so there must be a lot of unmarried women who have reached the age of 25. Why did you capture that lady as a sacrifice? Little Fatty touched his nose and coughed. It's strange. This Spring City is really weird. They choose their sacrifices based on their beauty. Among the 25-year-old unmarried girls, they choose the prettiest girl. Liang Qingqing suddenly shivered. She secretly compared her appearance to the girl on the tray. She felt that she was more beautiful than the girl on the tray. She suddenly felt lucky that she was not from this weird Spring City. Otherwise, in 4 years, it might be her turn to become a sacrifice in the river. Little Fatty chuckled and glanced at Liang Qingqing. As if guessing what she was thinking, he hurriedly said, "Don't panic, this is only for ordinary people." Thinking about it, a level 5 fire spirit master like Liang Qingqing would not be so easily subdued and become Du Chuanjiang's sacrifice. Even so, Liang Qingqing and the others were still unconvinced. They rubbed their fists and were eager to give it a try. "I'll go save that poor girl. Why should a good-looking girl become a sacrificial offering in this river without getting married at the age of 25? The little fatty hurriedly stopped Liang Qingqing. "Hey, don't. Let's wait and see." The main thing was that he didn't know the situation. If he acted rashly, it might not be of much help to others. However, Liang Qingqing was an impatient person. "Didn't you already ask around? There's no time to lose. You guys wait here. I'll go alone." After saying that, Liang Qingqing was about to squeeze out of the crowd and walk towards the sacrificial procession. Arbor immediately grabbed her arm and said with a serious face, "Let me do it." Everyone was speechless. The little girl's expression was eager to try. Naturally, they didn't want to spoil her mood. She wanted to see what kind of god this immortal in the river was. He actually tricked so many people to come and pay their respects. Arbor didn't say anything and quickly walked in front of the sacrificial procession. Chapter 3005. And at this time, the elderly presiding over the sacrifice had already impatiently ordered 2 people to go forward and pull that old woman away. The old woman couldn't resist wailing loudly, "You can't do this. I beg you, let my daughter go." Liang Qingqing still couldn't hold back and followed closely behind the little stoic to the sacrifice team. "Hurry and release her." These people were truly too excessive. She wasn't their daughter, so they didn't feel any heartache even after throwing her into the river. To put it bluntly, these people only dared to lay their hands on commoners. If it was someone with true status, they naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be manipulated as they wished. When the elderly presiding over the sacrifice heard this, he glanced at them coldly. "Someone, disperse all the unrelated people. Continue with the sacrifice." With a light swish, the 2 burly men holding the living tray above their heads felt their shoulders go numb. Their bodies trembled slightly, and they involuntarily fell backward. He was very clear that he had fallen into someone's trap, but he simply couldn't control himself. He could only watch helplessly as he fell backward with a bang, landing head first on the ground. The girl on the tray naturally lost her balance and fell down. When Liang Qingqing saw this, she couldn't help but be amused. She quickly rushed forward and supported that girl, allowing her to steady herself. An attack talisman flew up from Arbor and directly pounced at that gloomy elderly man. "Since someone must be the sacrifice, why don't you go?" That elderly man was dumbstruck. Before he could react, he felt his body being forcefully pulled by a force, and he flew uncontrollably toward the riverbank. "Ah!" the elderly man yelled in alarm. The people around him all reached out in a flurry, wanting to grab him, but they simply couldn't resist that pulling force. The sacrifice team instantly fell into chaos. Everyone screamed in disarray and fled toward the back of the crowd. In just an instant, the staff in the cyan robe elder's hand flew out, and he uncontrollably rolled toward the riverbank. After a loud splash, what made everyone dumbfounded was that the old man really rolled into the river. Prince Emo couldn't help but grimace. He raised his hand to cover his face. He didn't see anything. His wife definitely didn't cause any trouble. Duan Yu took a step forward and calmly turned to sweep a glance at Mulyen. He couldn't resist frowning strangely. "What's with that expression of yours? Was this guy trying to hypnotize himself that he didn't see anything?" Mu Xingchen's figure flashed, and he used spiritual energy to separate the crowd before hastily rushing to the little stoic and Liang Qingqing's side. "What are you spacing out for? Quick! Big Brother Mu can't be thinking that the little stoic will suffer, right?" Duan Yu couldn't resist muttering. According to his understanding of the little fellow, the next one to suffer would definitely be the enemy. On the other side, less than a few seconds after the elderly man fell into the river, the entire Du Chunjiang suddenly flared up. Everyone retreated several steps in terror. Someone shouted, "The immortal in the river has been infuriated," and everyone fled in all directions in a hubbub. At the same time, a huge wave surged out of the river and splashed toward the riverbank with a splash. At first glance, everyone saw the old man being lifted up by the water and tumbling out of the river. Chapter 3006. With a second glance, she was horrified to see a large water snake suffused with an oily green glow burrowing out from behind the elderly man and swallowing him into its stomach in one gulp, not giving him the slightest chance to react. That water snake spat out a bolt of lightning that landed in the water, creating a sizzling electric current that struck towards the riverbank like a bolt of lightning. Qi Xianxian cursed in her mind and reflexively reached out to pull on the little stoic's arm. However, in the blink of an eye, the little stoic had already acted. Several defensive talismans landed in front of them, blocking the lightning that was snaking towards them at lightning speed. At this time, Mu Xingqian had already rushed over and threw out a dozen fireballs without any explanation. They danced in the air as they collided with the water snake that had suddenly burrowed out of the river. After a few sizzling sounds, everyone could clearly see that when the fireball touched the scales of the water snake, the flames disappeared. The little stoic blinked and couldn't help but lament softly, "This large water snake can't be the immortal in the river that Spring City worships, right?" Liang Qingqing nodded. "It's very possible." She grabbed the little stoic's hand and retreated, involuntarily exclaiming, "This water snake nests in this river all year round, so it should be the overlord of this area." Just as she finished speaking, a row of sword-toothed fish leaped out from the riverbank. They leaped 1/2 meter high and pecked through a stone tablet on the riverbank in a few moves. Upon seeing this, Auber involuntarily creased his brows, thinking that this guy had quite a few helpers. However, it was fortunate that these things could only stay in the water. Once they came ashore, they were like tigers without fangs and were nothing to be afraid of. The sacrificial ceremony had long ended. Everyone wasn't an idiot, and those who could escape had already fled without a trace. The remaining sacrificial procession had also thrown away the sacrificial offerings in their hands and mostly fled. Mu Xingqian circled a defensive talisman with his hand and blocked Sir Jojo, Liang Qingqing, and the others. Mo Lian and Duan Yu also hurried over. However, before the two of them could make a move, they heard a delicate rebuke from afar. Immediately afterwards, a sword light landed in the water, creating a huge splash with a bang. The big water snake roared and swung its tail. With a boom, its tail swept across the surface of the water, rolling up a huge wave. At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen had also stepped on the water surface and hurried over. When he saw the situation on the riverbank, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch as he felt a little uncomfortable. What's going on? Didn't they say they shouldn't cause trouble? Why did it still cause such a huge commotion? He propped up a defensive spiritual barrier with both hands, blocking out the watery light that filled the sky. He had already stepped on the water's surface and swiftly arrived beside the little stoic and the others. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but roar, "What are you doing?" Hiss, hiss, hiss. At this moment, the giant water snake in the river was clearly enraged by everyone's repeated provocations. "Be careful. This water snake is a level 10 divine beast." The woman who reminded them was the one who had dropped the sword light from the sky. The little stoic glanced at her before shifting her gaze to the woman next to her. She stared intently at the newcomer and racked her brain. Why does she look so familiar? So it's Princess Jing of the Pangu clan from the Aurora Sand Field. Mo Lian nodded indifferently. It was only now that she realized the experts Holy Sun Mi Yen was waiting for were actually these two people from the Pangu clan. The little stoic, who didn't recognize people, suddenly came to a realization and stared fixedly at the woman next to Princess Jing of the Pangu clan. She is. Chapter 3007. She really looked very familiar, but Auber couldn't recall where she had seen her before. The little stoic calmly blinked her eyes. She saw that woman's eyes seemed to be poisoned with venom when she glanced at her. The little stoic racked her brains for a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind, and she couldn't resist saying, "Oh, you're that idiot who sent several hundred people to kill me near Mount Daizong in Poland Prefecture, right? What was her name again?" The little stoic already couldn't remember clearly. What was going on? Wasn't this woman already dead? Because she had personally executed this person, her impression of her was rather deep. She was very clear that she wouldn't show mercy. Back then, at the entrance of Wanlu Town's Shunlai Inn, she had slashed a bloody wound on her neck. She made a bloody cut on the woman's neck. Judging from the way she dealt with people, there was no way she could have survived. But this person was actually alive. Not only was she alive, but her cultivation had also advanced. Evidently, this woman who had come back from the dead already had a cultivation realm above hers. Even with her heaven-defying cultivation speed, she still wasn't as fast as the other parties. The little Stoic blinked, and her fair and tender face subconsciously tensed up. One had to know that back in Wanlu town, this woman's cultivation was clearly far inferior to hers. The unhappy little Stoic suspiciously swept her gaze over that woman. At this time, the latter finally lifted her head and looked straight at Arbor with a faint smile on her face. Her pitch-black eyes seemed to contain two malicious vipers as she stared coldly at her without saying a word. Suddenly, a heavy pressure rushed toward Arbor. Without any warning, the little girl only felt her breathing turn heavy, as if her body would be crushed by a tall mountain at any moment. In the blink of an eye, Prince Mo pulled his wife into his arms to protect her, a trace of anger surfacing in his eyes. At the same time, Mu Xingchen also narrowed his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, he instantly rebounded the pressure released by the other party. Cough. The woman took a few steps back before she managed to stabilize herself. Her face was flushed red from holding back her anger. Jing Minyao. Princess Jing frowned. She was very displeased with her third younger sister for finding trouble for no reason. Did Jing Minyao forget the pain after the wound healed? She had already died once, but she was still so willful. Wang Liming did not know how to teach her daughter. Now that the Crown Prince of Shenzhou was standing in front of them, what good would come of attacking his little crown princess rashly? Jing Minyao's brainless approach was ridiculous. Do you want to die? The Crown Prince was furious. With a slight movement of his hand, he pulled Sir Jojo down. The little guy's gaze circled around Jing Minyao's body with a trace of curiosity. This person could not die for the time being. As a curious child, she wanted to find out why this person came back from the dead. In reality, faint ripples were surfacing in Xiao Mu's heart right now. Even those who had their throats slit by her were able to come back to life. It was clear that this family had a secret treasure that no one knew about. She seemed to have grasped a strange inspiration, but before she could continue thinking, that hissing water snake swung its tail and swept toward the shore. Splat! The tail slapped the riverbank, directly smashing 200-year-old trees into pieces. Chapter 3008. Jing Linyao's attack and reaction speed were extremely fast. A long sword leaped up from her back with a whoosh, and the instant it flew forward, it ignited flames in front of her and built a tall wall of fire. When the fire soared up, the huge wave that the water snake sent out collided head-on with the wall of fire. The instant the water and fire came into contact, the fire seemed to be instantly extinguished by the torrential water. That water current was about to pounce on them regardless of anything. The little Stoic calmly covered herself with an eggshell defensive barrier and expressionlessly gazed at the stream of water that swept towards her with a splash. Mu Xingchen's fingertips swiftly moved, and he threw over a dozen Earth Spirit talismans. Earth walls rapidly rose from the ground and were toppled one by one under the impact of the huge wave. It wasn't until the water current toppled 3 earth walls that it ran out of momentum and slowly came to a stop. The water current spread to their feet. They looked down and then looked up at the water snake perpendicular to the river's surface. That pair of lantern-sized eyes were currently staring fixedly at Arbor's group. The sinister intent in its eyes made people slightly apprehensive. Arbor creased his brows. This water snake had been entrenched in Du Chun River for who knew how long. Judging from today's situation, it probably wouldn't end peacefully. Mo Lien patted the back of the little fellow's hand and whispered, "Wait here." He was just about to go over and personally dispose of this beast, but to his surprise, that huge-tailed water snake used its triangular eyes to carefully stare at them before suddenly plunging its head into the water and falling silent at once. Mo Lien, Arbor, and Duan Yu's group looked at each other, bewildered. What was going on? They hadn't even started fighting yet, but that water snake suddenly slipped away. Then why did it cause such a huge commotion earlier? Holy Sun Mi Yen also sighed in relief and said, "It's not easy for beasts to advance to divine beasts. It seems that this water snake is also smart and intelligent. It should know that if you gang up on it, it won't be your match." Arbor glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen suspiciously. "You are not it. How do you know what it is thinking?" He spoke as if it was true. What did he even say about being worried that they would gang up on him? That was why he ran away. Holy Sun Mi Yan's face was full of righteousness, and his eyes were calm. Although this Holy Sun's guess is not correct, it is not far from it. All right. Holy Sun Mi Yan directly interrupted the little Stoic. It's getting late. Since these two from the Panga clan have also arrived, then let's board the ship and continue our journey. I think it's better for you to set up some defenses on that ship, the little Stoic said dryly. Protection. That water snake must have dived into the water and waited for an opportunity to strike. I think that as long as we give it a chance, it will come back and continue to cause trouble for us. Holy Sun Mi Yan grumpily retorted, You are not that water snake. How do you know it will still lurk in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to take action? Enough. Let's talk after we return to the ship. Holy Sun Mi Yan harumphed and turned around to leave swiftly on the water's surface. Sir Jojo pursed his lips and quietly said, That's my intuition. Qi Xian glanced in the direction that Holy Sun left. Ignore him. I think this person won't shed tears until he sees the coffin. Emolian was a bit amused. In that case, let's also return to the ship first. Arbor nodded and looked back. Chapter 3009. The sacrificial maiden that Liang Qingqing had saved earlier had already escaped with her mother. The few of them didn't pay much attention to it. They were just casually saving someone, so there was no need for others to come forward and thank them. If they left, then so be it. It was quite worry-free. Arbor and Emolien's group returned to the ship and saw that the two sisters, Jing Linyao and Jing Minyao, had also boarded the ship. Miss Chiao looked at Jing Minyao meaningfully and secretly tugged at her husband's sleeve. Emolien nodded slightly in understanding and pulled her little hand to the stern of the ship. The two found a secluded spot at the stern of the ship and then whispered to each other. Wife, why are you always tugging at me and not letting me deal with that woman? Prince Emo rubbed his little wife's head. Now that this person is a level 3 divine master, it will be somewhat difficult for you to deal with her. Yet Xiao Mu was perplexed no matter how much she thought about it. How did she get promoted so quickly? Do you still remember the clan's secret technique that I mentioned to you before? Arbor suddenly understood. You're saying that this Jing Minyao was cultivated using a secret technique. She used Mithril to comprehend one of the 5 spirit origins, skipped the spirit realm, and went straight to the divine realm? Emolien nodded with a straight face. Arbor blinked and patted Emolien's chest. Don't worry, I will run if I can't beat her. Emolien inexplicably wanted to laugh. She reached out and pulled her to her side. She lowered her head and rubbed her little face. Little liar. When have you ever run away when you fight? In the end, didn't she get really angry when she fought with her opponent? The stronger the opponent, the stronger she became. Arbor moved her little mouth, wanting to say something to defend herself, but after thinking about it, it seemed that it was indeed as Emolien said. She pretended to cough and then said, Emolien, what treasure does the Jing clan have? Are you talking about Jing Minyao's resurrection? Emolien said softly, I've always heard that the Jing clan indeed has a treasure that can pass down the yin and yang fortune called the soul congregation bell. This soul gathering bell can gather a person's soul, reverse the yin and yang of heaven and earth, and bring back the dead. Rumor has it that people who have been dead for more than 10 years can be revived with the help of the soul convening bell. As long as the body is intact, resurrection is not a problem at all. A trace of excitement flashed across the little Stoic's face, and she reached out to grab Emolien's arm at once. What's wrong, Jojo? Soul gathering bell, I. She finally knew what the spark that flashed through her mind was. She wanted this soul congregation bell. Chapter 30:10. But as for whether we can succeed or not, that will depend on the will of the heavens. Emolien held her little hand and said softly, What I mean is, even if we really can't save Senior Sister Sue, you can't be too disappointed. He was really afraid. Thinking about the 2 years she disappeared, he couldn't help but feel a little panicked. He was afraid that the little fellow would be disappointed and sink into her pessimistic mood again. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the light in her eyes. So at this moment, his heart was full of hatred for Jing Minyao. If she hadn't come back from the dead, Jojo wouldn't have coveted the Jing family's sacred weapon. The little fellow held his large hand and nodded vigorously. "Don't worry, I will adjust my mood and definitely won't let myself sink into it." Emolien nodded and said softly while holding her little hand, "It's said that this soul-gathering bell can only be used 3 times. And as far as I know, when the bell was in the Jing family's hands, there were only 2 chances left. This response was wasted on Jing Minyao, so there's only 1 chance left." Aba subconsciously clenched her little fist. "I wonder who has this thing now? Princess Jing?" Although Princess Jing was a scheming person, Aba actually admired her magnanimous temperament. Compared to Jing Minyao's incompetence, this Princess Jing was simply the Jing family's glory and hope, the perfect example of a bad bamboo producing good bamboo shoots. "Let's test it out first." Emolien narrowed her eyes and chuckled. "Anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities along the way." Aba thought that was right and pulled her husband back to the deck. The moment they stepped onto the deck, they saw Jing Minyao leaning against the railing and staring at them silently. Aba didn't speak to her and walked straight to Holy Sun Mi Yen. "Hey, look at the sky, it's going to rain tonight. Tell the boatman to hurry up, don't get caught in the middle of the river. With the storm, the boat will—" Hey. Shut up." Holy Sun Mi Yen really wanted to reach out and cover the little fellow's crow mouth. "What are you saying? Wasn't the weather perfect? Why would there be a storm? Do you think you're an emissary of the heavenly faction? Do you think you can just say that the wind will blow and the rain will fall just because you say so?" Peepa. As soon as he finished speaking, a bolt of lightning rushed down and struck the side of the mast, scaring the boatman. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched as they looked at the calm Lady Xiqiao with strange and indecipherable expressions. Holy Sun Mi Yen opened his watery eyes wide. He raised his head and looked at the pitch-black sky. Immediately, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. "Hurry up! The storm is coming!" Qiao Mu hollered at that Holy Sun Mi Yen and grumbled, "With your ship's sailing speed, the secret realm will have already ended by the time you reach it." This time, nobody treated it as a joke anymore. Holy Sun Mi Yen rushed all the way to the small control room and roared at the captain, Old he, stay calm." The storm arrived in less than a quarter of an hour. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. Everyone silently chanted in their hearts, "Stoic face, you jinx. You're too smart." Crack. An S-shaped lightning split open a crack in the horizon, and the dark night was instantly illuminated by the lightning into a snowy day. Chapter 30:11. Coo Coo. The familiar chirping instantly stimulated Aba's senses, causing her to be on guard at once. She raised her hand and gently swiped it, and a delicate crow-repeating crossbow appeared in Aba's hand. From the horizon, the coo coo sound could be clearly heard. Aba looked up and saw 7 or 8 giant birds with black wings and sharp beaks flying in the direction of their ship. At the same time, the entire Du Chunjiang was filled with a layer of intertwined lightning. This lightning was intertwined in the sky above Du Chunjiang, dark purple with a hint of inky color, as if it could fall down at any time. Holy Sun Mi Yen was stunned for a moment and muttered to himself, "The sky above Du Chunjiang is forbidden to fly. No living thing can fly above Du Chunjiang. So what's going on with those big birds that suddenly flew over?" Aba coldly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen. "Isn't this your bird?" Hearing her angry tone, Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but retort, "How is this my bird?" "Don't deny it," Aba said coldly to him. "You know very well what kind of shady business the Sun Moon Temple is doing in the dark." Holy Sun Mi Yen was even angrier. He opened his mouth and was about to refute when he saw the little girl turn her head away, looking like she was too lazy to talk nonsense with him anymore. He couldn't help but feel suffocated. Aba stretched out her arm and steadily held the crow-repeating crossbow. She directly shot a crow-gold arrow from it, aiming at the night-caw bird in the air. With a swoosh, the crow-gold arrow was like a white light cutting through the night sky, flying towards the leading big bird like a meteor catching up with the moon. It hit the target in one shot. The big bird let out an ear-piercing chirp, struggling to flap its wings, and suddenly fell from the sky. Bang! It crashed into the water. At the same time, the night-caw birds that were originally hovering back and forth in the sky were bombarded by the sweeping thunder and lightning above Du Chunjiang. For a moment, there were sharp chirping sounds. 7 or 8 night-caw birds rampaged in the air and were constantly shot down by the thunder and lightning. Xiao Mu's gaze was a bit hesitant as she met Mo Lian's gaze. Was there something wrong with the night-caw bird's brain? Why did he appear in Du Chunjiang, a place where flying was prohibited? Who were they trying to attack? Or perhaps, some idiot had hastily gathered them and completely forgot about the fact that Du Chunjiang was forbidden from flying. Arbor shifted his gaze to Nie Yaoguang and glanced at her. Naturally, he could not tell anything from her expression, but Arbor had a strange intuition that this matter was most likely caused by this brainless saintess. Hey, look. What kind of ghost bird is that? It can even swim in the water. A Hong Fu Academy student who was leaning against the railing of the deck couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that the few big birds that had fallen into the river had already retracted their wings slightly. They swam wantonly in the water and pecked at the bottom of the ship. All the students secretly cursed in their hearts as they stared with their watery eyes at the edge of the ship's railing and looked down. *T. These damn birds are pecking at the bottom of our ship. Just as the night-caw bird was about to move, the storm that could no longer control itself finally swept over with a ferocious momentum. A thick bolt of lightning coincidentally struck the head of one of the night-caw birds, causing it to fall into the water. Chapter 30:12. Suddenly, a large, slippery water snake's tail burrowed out from the bottom of the water and directly whipped back the night-caw bird that wanted to peek out of the water. This night-caw bird was probably beaten senseless. After it fell back into the water, it didn't emerge for a long time. The river water boiled like boiling water, and the level 10 divine beast that had appeared on the riverbank earlier suddenly appeared again. With the thrill of revenge, it fiercely swept its tail at their ship. Smack! 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 The water snake's tail, which carried a trace of electricity, heavily whipped the ship's railing and directly pierced through it. The students who were originally standing beside the railing hastily retreated. Everyone reflexively activated their defensive spiritual weapons to withstand the violent wind and rain outside, in addition to the occasional flash of lightning. This was truly a trap. They encountered this kind of trap on their first night at Du Chunjiang. It was all the little stoic's fault for jinxing things. Truly, whatever she said came true, whatever came was unlucky. Look at the current situation. F***CK, it was simply unbearable to the extreme. At this time, everyone was caught in a dilemma. If they continued to let this water snake wantonly destroy their ship, everyone would have to go into the water. If they wanted to fight this water snake, they would have to tread on the waves and rise into the air to deal with it. However, with the lightning above their heads glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, no one could fully concentrate on the battle under these circumstances. Arbor aimed at the water snake's tail and fired 2 arrows. The crow-gold arrows created sparks when they rubbed against the large water snake's scales, infuriating it on the spot. It hissed and stared fixedly at Xiao Mu with its cold, triangular eyes. It raised its long tail high up and smashed it at the people on the deck. "You're courting death." Arbor narrowed her eyes and suddenly leaped, about to jump into the river. Prince Mo, who was constantly paying attention to his wife's every move, jumped in fright when he saw this and hastily reached out to pull the little fellow back. Mu Xingchen was also startled and blocked Arbor with his hand. "Younger sister, what are you doing? Of course we're going to kill it, pull out its teeth, and give them to Lotus as refining materials." Everyone couldn't help but be speechless. This little girl spoke as if she wasn't going to kill a level 10 divine beast, but was only going to deal with a small low-level spiritual beast. Wasn't he overconfident? Didn't they see that Holy Sun Mi Yen, a spiritual venerable, was still considering how to attack? You suddenly want to jump into the river after slapping your head. How much confidence do you have in yourself? Wait. Emolienne grabbed her little hand worriedly to prevent her from jumping down. The Holy Son of the Divine Hall is here. Before we enter the secret territory, the Divine Hall should have the responsibility to protect us. At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen was holding up a defensive barrier. Hearing this, he couldn't help but want to spit on Emolienne's face. What about the responsibility to protect them? Then who would protect the people in the Divine Hall? At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen saw that both of them were looking at his face. He was so angry that he didn't know where to vent. The wind and rain are getting heavier. Let's talk inside the cabin first. Boom! The bottom of the boat seemed to have been hit by something heavy, and the whole boat couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, the boatmen all looked as if they were mourning for their loved ones. They shouted at Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Lord Holy Sun, it's not good, it's not good. You're the one who's not good. Your whole family is not good. Go to sleep. Come back tomorrow morning at 9:30 to catch up on the chapters." Chapter 30:13. What happened? Holy Sun Mi Yen grumpily roared. One of the boatmen said while trembling with fear, "Lord Holy Sun, the ship is moving sideways. Water is entering." Everyone silently cursed in their minds. This was terrible. Water was entering the ship. Could it be that they had to freaking swim across such a huge Du Chunjiang? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The Holy Sun was furious and roared, "What are you all standing around for? You. Go down and see if you can salvage the situation. You, all of you, come with me. Hurry and deal with that water snake." The little stoic looked up at her husband. When Holy Sun Mi Yen pointed at a series of you, just now, he pointed at Sir Jojo. But didn't her husband say that the temple could resolve this kind of situation by itself? Why did he have to drag Sir Jojo in? The little fellow suspiciously swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. The latter grumpily turned around and shouted at her, "Hurry up! Mushroom, what mushroom? Hurry and come over." The little fatty, who was called to repair the ship, nimbly moved his chubby body and ran off with several temple priests. The remaining people temporarily followed Holy Sun Mi Yen to the railing and used the power of the 5 spirits to attack the nightcaw birds and large water snakes below. This time, no one could continue to conceal their strength. They collectively attacked the things in the water and attracted their attention, no longer damaging the ship's hull. That level, 10 divine beast was extremely powerful. Amidst the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, it nimbly moved like a bolt of white light. From time to time, it would burrow out from the bow and swing its tail. From time to time, it would also stick its head out from the side of the ship and deliver a fatal blow to the people repairing the ship below. Many boatmen lost their lives in its hands, and miserable screams could be heard from below from time to time. Abba coldly swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. "Have your people go down. Fight it at close range." This large water snake was so slippery that it could most likely dodge a long-range attack. In this way, not only would the people on the deck be wasting their spiritual energy for nothing, it wouldn't be of much use. At this time, Holy Sun Mi Yen was also enraged, and he turned a glance at Emolienne and Duan Yu. You and you. Come down with me." Sir Jojo glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen expressionlessly. Following the direction of Holy Sun Mi Yan's finger, he moved to the side. Then, Holy Sun Mi Yan's finger fell on the face of another person beside him. That person was the black-bearded old man beside Madame Goen. He was a level 5 Divine Realm expert, Mr. Zhao Guochong. Holy Sun Mi Yen was slightly dumbfounded. He was clearly pointing at the little stoic just now, but this D*Emendal actually dodged to the side without any trace of politeness, directly entrusting the mission to that black-bearded elderly man. Zhao Guochong's complexion was also very unsightly. He had already expended a lot of divine energy to resist Xiao Mu's divine energy ball just now. On top of that, He had also expended quite a bit of divine energy from attacking the great water snake earlier. If he could avoid going down to face the water snake, it would be best not to go down. Mr. Jojo threw a contemptuous glance at Holy Sun Mi Yen as if saying, "Are you all right? I'm still a baby. How could you ask me to do such a dangerous thing?" Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but twitch his mouth corners. When he was selecting people, he naturally selected the strongest to go with him. Although this D*MN doll's realm didn't look like much, it was obvious that she had plenty of good stuff on her. Chapter 30:14. With this little fellow assisting him from the side, his battle prowess would definitely increase by several levels. Duan Yu couldn't resist wanting to laugh. He took out a raven bone fan from his sleeve and leisurely fanned himself. "What? Mr. Zhao doesn't dare to go down?" Emolien didn't say anything and merely looked at that elderly gentleman with a faint smile. Zhao Guochang was a bit angry out of humiliation. Ever since he broke through the scope of a god realm cultivator and made a name for himself, no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a tone. This junior in front of him made him extremely angry, but he couldn't flare up for the time being. Mu Xingchen summoned a long sword from his conscience and walked to the railing. He turned to glance at Zhao Guochang. "Sir, please." Simply baffling. Zhao Guochang glared angrily at these juniors, but he couldn't vent his anger at all. Simply abominable. What were they trying to do by forcing a duck onto a perch for? Madame Gowen's expression flickered, and she quickly said, "What are you all doing?" "Mr. Zhao is old. He..." Pfft. Duan Yu suddenly laughed and shook his head in disdain. "So he's a cowardly bandit. All right then, let's go." Let alone a god realm expert who couldn't bear to hear such words, even a random mystic realm cultivator wouldn't allow someone to crown him with the words, "cowardly bandit." Zhao Guochang couldn't help but be enraged, and he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Go!" This meant that he was convinced. Emolien glanced at him with a spurious smile. She leisurely removed her black velvet cloak and jumped onto the railing with a whoosh. Zhao Guochang's brain heated up, and he also jumped onto the railing and jumped down first. It was a miserable storm below, and the waves were as high as a 2-story building. As soon as he went down, his whole body was drenched. The night-caw birds cooed, and their eyes flashed with green light as they swarmed towards him. Madame Gowen was very anxious and shouted sternly, "What are you all still standing there for? Quickly go down and help Mr. Zhao." From this, it could be seen that Holy Sun Mi Yen was a kind person. Almost without saying anything, he also jumped down. Qin Xian, Qin Xin, and Ming Yasi also leaped onto the railing. They cast a sidelong glance at Duan Yu and Emolien, who were standing on the railing and admiring the scenery, and silently cursed in their hearts. Shameless, shameless. After tricking the others down, these two actually had the nerve to continue watching here. Mu Xingchen was also an honest child. He originally wanted to jump down with Holy Sun Mi Yen, but Duan Yu tugged at him. Hence, he stood there in a daze and looked back at the two of them. After Zhao Guochang and Holy Sun Mi Yen jumped down, they were surrounded by a large flock of night-caw birds. At the same time, that huge water snake also came out from one side and stared at the two of them with a pair of creepy triangular eyes. Chi-la! A bolt of lightning swept across the water. This water snake was clearly a fellow with thunder spirit energy, so it could fearlessly advance and retreat with a sense of propriety and avoid the lightning bolts that filled the sky. Zhao Guochang reinforced 3 layers of defense on his body, and his water spirit struck back, colliding head-on with the oncoming lightning bolt. Chi-la sounds made people's hair stand on end. That lightning bolt abruptly broke through his water spirit, and an L-shaped sawtooth wriggled out from within, crashing towards Zhao Guochang's body with a whoosh. Chapter 30:15. At the same time, Prince Amo narrowed his eyes and moved like a rainbow flashing across the moon. Raven Moon was dyed with a speck of pitch-black cold light, and it cleaved a scarlet flame chain towards the water snake. Zhao Guochang in front of her. After a loud splash, A scarlet wall of fire rose up from the water and burned fiercely in the night. At the same time, Duan Yu's raven bone fan also moved. Thousands of cold specks flew out and formed a circular encirclement, abruptly attacking Zhao Guochang's chest. These two people suddenly attacked almost without warning. Following this set of movements, they flew down and rushed behind Zhao Guochang like lightning. Zhao Guochang was shocked almost instantly. He simply couldn't believe that these two people would attack him for no reason under everyone's watchful eyes. However, there was no time for him to ponder. Raven Moon's sword light had already broken through Zhao Guochang's defenses and arrived in front of him. Zhao Guochang's eyes darkened, and he shouted angrily. A scale-like defensive item quickly formed on his chest, and he shouted, "Punk! You want to kill me? You're still too. Chi!" A scorching flame attacked Zhao Guochang's chest. He originally thought that this godly armor could absolutely block any attack from these two juniors. Unfortunately, Zhao Guochang truly overestimated himself. Bam! He was sent flying by that fierce flame and retreated several steps. When he looked back in horror, he saw the water snake's sinister head peeking out from behind his head. Its gaping maw sent chills down one's spine. Zhao Guochang's body suddenly shrank, only to hear a gotcha sound of bones breaking, accompanied by a sharp pain. Zhao Guochang only felt that his left shoulder was almost completely torn off, the pain causing his whole body to tremble. "Mr. Zhao!" Goen couldn't resist shrieking. Mr. Zhao, this deity realm expert, was her greatest reliance on this trip. Now, Mr. Zhao was beaten half to death by two juniors before they even entered the mystic realm. How could she endure this? Pfft! Mr. Zhao spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. With a roar, he stretched out his other uninjured arm and used all his strength to support the water snake's ferocious head. The big water snake hissed twice, and its body couldn't help but twist twice, throwing out huge waves. Its pair of triangular eyes coldly stared at Zhao Guochang in front of it. Zhao Guochang was in so much pain that his body trembled slightly. Just as he was about to call for his spirit beast, the thousands of cold lights had already arrived in front of him. Without any delay, they shot into his body. With a series of muffled sounds, Zhao Guochang's body was like a sieve that had been shot through. Small light spots appeared on his body one after another. Then, like a ball that had leaked air, his body began to gasp for air. Holding a long staff, Holy Sun Mi Yen stared blankly at the scene before him. F***CK. There was almost no room for him to react. It had only been 3 minutes since Emolian and Duan Yu joined hands, yet Zhao Guochang was already shot into a sieve. His entire body was covered in blood and bubbling with blood. No, it wasn't. This wasn't right. Holy Sun Mi Yen blankly thought. Just now, he clearly told everyone to join hands to deal with that big water snake. But why did the two of them, how did they attack Zhao Guochang? Before this, the two of them didn't give any warning, and he had never seen them discuss it with each other. This tacit understanding was too terrifying. That's it for now. We'll continue at midnight. Prepare to burn incense for the new year. Pray that I'll be prosperous in the coming year. Chapter 30:16. Sir Jojo watched the scene before him with sparkling eyes. He abruptly turned around and punched Madame Goen's face. "No one will protect you now." Madame Goen was startled, and she reflexively bounced back before reflexively blocking with her hand. Bam! The defensive shield on her hand was instantly shattered by Arbor's punch, and she was sent flying backward by the force of the impact. Madame Goen crashed heavily into a wooden window on the side of the ship and flew in through the broken window before smashing onto the ground. She was dumbstruck for a moment. What? She was actually punched into the cabin from the outside by the little girl? Everyone stared at the little girl dumbfoundedly, unable to speak for a long time. The little girl's bad habit of taking action as soon as she said she wanted to. It was simply shocking. Wait, shouldn't they be allies right now? Evidently, in the little girl's eyes, people like Madame Goen couldn't be considered her allies at all. Previously at the Three River Pier, The little girl hadn't been able to find a chance to deal a vicious blow to Madame Goen due to the protection of that deity realm expert, Mr. Zhao. However, this didn't mean that she had forgotten the previous incident. Even Queen Fu Sha, who didn't mind the commotion, couldn't help but shudder. She didn't expect this girl to be so ruthless. Moreover, it had been a while since the incident, yet she was still bent on teaching Madame Goen a lesson. Xiao Mu stomped over and circled into the cabin through the hole in the window. She coldly said, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." Everyone, F***CK, it was clearly such a vicious incident, but why did they feel like laughing? It's impolite not to reciprocate? Why did these words sound so familiar? Didn't the little fellow already nag about it when she was teaching Madame Goen a lesson? Could it be that the lesson from the first half wasn't over yet, and it continued until today, and the lesson only ended in the second half? Queen Fu Sha twitched her mouth with an odd expression. She recalled that they had merely eaten the other party's barbecue, but the freaking little stoic made them vomit for a full 10 hours. 10 hours. Now, whenever her subordinates saw someone barbecue, their hair would stand on end and they would keep a respectful distance. This was simply throwing up psychological trauma. In the future, even if the barbecue was placed in front of them, they probably wouldn't be able to eat it. What a shameless little pervert. Queen Fu Sha cursed in her heart. At this time, Arbor had already walked to Madame Goen's side. Looking at her frightened eyes, he twirled the long sword in his hand. "I let you go again and again. Do you think I'm afraid of you? What do you want? You. Don't act recklessly. If the great emperor knows. If you know, then you know." Arbor plunged his sword into Madame Guo's thigh. Ah! Madame Goen was in so much pain that she sat upright. She twisted her body in fear and crawled backward. "You, don't come over, don't come over." Arbor reached out and gently pulled out the sword from her leg. He asked coldly, "Have you thought about how you want to die?" A few drops of dark red blood fell from the sword, but there was not a single red mark on the sword. Madame Guo's eyes widened in shock as she stared blankly at the little girl in front of her. "Yellow goat! Huang Yang!" Madame Goen seemed to have thought of something and shouted loudly. Chapter 30:17. Arbor glanced at her contemptuously. "Don't shout. It's useless even if you shout until your throat breaks." The little fellow used her sword to draw 2 lines in front of her chest. "I'm afraid that Mr. Zhao of yours is already dead. Now it's your turn." Arbor saw that she had one hand behind her back. She knew that she was up to no good and that she was definitely up to something. Sir Jojo only looked at the woman in front of him expressionlessly. He did not say anything. Duan Muqing stepped in from outside the hole and hurriedly called out to her. "Jojo, is there some trouble?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Madame Goen, who was lying on the ground, suddenly straighten her body and roared. "Little slut, I'll let you have a taste of my power." Madame Goen's eyes were filled with vicious anger. She stretched out her hand and waved a handful of powder. Duan Muqing hurriedly rushed forward. He originally thought that the little girl would be caught off guard and suffer a great loss. Who knew? The little girl was already prepared. She calmly took out a black frying pan from her inner world and slapped it directly on Madame Goen's face. With a loud bang, Madame Goen let out a miserable cry and fell backwards. Her big head heavily knocked against the deck of the boat, making a loud thud. The frying pan swatted away most of the powder, leaving only a small portion floating in front of Arbor. However, Sir Jojo was very guarded against this woman. He had already set up several layers of defense around himself without leaving a trace. Therefore, Madame Goen's little bit of powder was unable to break through her defense and be absorbed into her body. At this time, Duan Muqing had already arrived in front of Arbor. He anxiously grabbed her arm. "Jojo, are you all right? What can happen to me?" Sir Jojo said expressionlessly. He used the frying pan to slap Madame Goen's face again. "The one who's not all right is this fellow." Duan Muqing looked at the little fellow in front of him speechlessly. He coughed lightly and nodded. Looking at this lady's pitiful appearance, it was obvious that she did not get any benefits from Jojo. Madame Gowan suddenly burst into tears. Crown Princess, you can't kill me." "The Crown Princess. I am the Crown Prince's aunt. If you kill me, how can you face the Empress in the future?" "Crown Princess, I know I was wrong. Why don't you spare me this time, Crown Princess?" Madame Gowan cried with snot and tears. The scene was a bit funny. Chiao Mu's cold gaze swept over her, and she involuntarily creased her brows when she saw this fellow crying to this extent. She had never seen such a situation before. If this National Security Agency insisted on fighting with her to the end, she would just kill her. But now, he was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy while crying out loud. It was really a bit of an eyesore. The little fellow pursed his little mouth and forcefully flung his sleeve that was grabbed by Madame Gowan. He expressionlessly turned around and walked towards the deck. Stinking shameless thing. He was already so old, but he was still crying like a baby. In the future, when he saw Sir Jojo, he had to hurry and take a detour. Don't talk nonsense all day. Arbor had just arrived on the deck when she saw the big water snake creating a 3-meter-tall splash of water. It was like a raging wave that came towards her. She did not panic at all. She only glanced at the wave indifferently. Then, she raised a small hand and drew a circle of defensive array glyphs around her. "Sleep. Come back at 9:30 tomorrow morning." Chapter 30:18. Bang! While water splashed everywhere, Arbor had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. The teleportation talisman flashed and disappeared, allowing Arbor to suddenly stand on the ship's railing. The river breeze brushed against Arbor's face, and her skirt fluttered. Arbor's black hair fluttered slightly, and the 3-foot-long sword in her hand glinted coldly. Her icy eyes had already met the great snake's gloomy eyes. Hiss! The little white snake on her wrist swiftly slithered and abruptly opened its towering mouth, biting at the oncoming great water snake. That great water snake certainly didn't expect the little girl to have a great snake sacred beast coiled around her body. It seemed to be taken aback for a split second, and its snake head abruptly tilted to the side as it retreated in alarm. However, it was already too late. The little white snake's towering snake head had already lifted up, and its mouth bit down on the great water snake's vital point like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds. "Chee!" The great water snake hissed and swayed its body repeatedly, retreating with all its might in alarm, wanting to continue retreating back into the river to hide. At this time, the little white snake had already transformed into a great void serpent several dozen meters long, so how could it allow this guy to continue escaping? The little white snake opened its mouth and bit down on a square inch below the great water snake's head. In less than a few seconds, black smoke billowed out from the water snake's body, eyes, and mouth in wisps. That appearance was a bit frightening. After Emolien and the others finished dealing with the nightcaw birds below, they turned around to look at the ship's railing. They saw the little stoic standing there like an expressionless little puppet. Her pitch-black eyes didn't move in the slightest under the night sky, and a great white snake several dozen meters long was loosely coiled around her several times in several coils of its tail. Its abdomen moved as it swallowed the water snake in front of it inch by inch. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but shudder at that terrifying appearance. The students of the other academies couldn't help but scatter like birds and beasts, shivering as they hid behind the destroyed cabins and by the broken wooden windows, watching the scene in front of them in horror. F***ck. What kind of beast was this beside the little stoic? It could actually swallow a level 10 divine beast alive without any hesitation? Wasn't this too cruel? On the other hand, Chiao Mu creased her brows. Seeing that the white snakelet had already swallowed 2/3 of the large water snake, its stomach rumbling, she couldn't resist stroking the white snakelet as she muttered to herself, "Too full, spit it out." Finally, the little white snake swallowed the big water snake whole, including its skin and bones. The snake's belly bulged, and it even burped a few times. Crown Prince Amo and Duan Yu looked at each other, both at a loss for words. Burp. The little white snake suddenly shrank inch by inch, and its body returned to its original slender appearance. However, its abdomen was still bulging, as if it was several months pregnant. Burp. Its pitiful pair of large watery eyes looked straight at Xiao Mu. Arbor couldn't help but knock on its head. I told you to eat too much, but you didn't vomit when I told you to. You got indigestion from being greedy, so who are you blaming? Sir Jojo quickly took out several bottles of digestion pills from her inner world and fed the little white snake one by one. As she fed it, she discovered that the little white snake's head slowly drooped down and curled up in her hand, unmoving. Arbor jumped in fright and quickly poked it with her finger. Ming Ming. Ming Ming. The little fellow was a bit anxious and poked it with her finger again. Chapter 30:19. Ming Ming. At this time, Mo Lien and Duan Yu had already jumped out of the water. Under the night wind, the water droplets on their bodies were slightly flung off, and with the evaporation of spiritual energy, the water droplets on their clothes instantly dried. Jojo, don't be anxious. Mo Lien flashed to her side and gently grasped her hand. The little white snake swallowed a level 10 divine beast's flesh and crystal core, so it needs some time to digest. I reckon this sacred beast is about to advance, Duan Yu said. Master, it looks like Ming Ming is about to advance. Put it on planet Shaji for its advancement. The sapling Qiuqiu's words soon confirmed their conjecture. Xiao Mu nodded and fed the white snakelet several more pills to aid in digestion and advancement. Only then did she put it away on Shaji planet and have the sapling Qiuqiu find an open space for it to prepare for its advancement. Qiuqiu solemnly said, Master, Ming Ming will probably need to sleep for a while. That divine beast is very helpful for its advancement, but it needs some time just to digest it. At this time, Arbor also discovered that the great ape on Fish Orchid Planet was pounding its chest and stamping its feet while howling at the sky. Arbor expressionlessly communicated with the sapling mentally. What is it doing? Qiuqiu chuckled mischievously. The great ape is at the pinnacle of spirit beasts, so it needs some divine beast bloodline to advance. Realization dawned on Arbor. He didn't expect that the little white snake would swallow a level 10 divine beast in one go, so it naturally couldn't squeeze out any bloodline. Arbor was a bit curious. Does a spirit beast have to have a divine beast bloodline to advance to a divine beast? Of course. The sapling quickly explained to the little master. Master, divine beasts aren't everywhere. Normally, they need a bloodline inheritance. It's even harder to find a sacred beast bloodline. Even if their ancestors have a sacred beast bloodline, not every one of them can become a sacred beast. The probability is still very small. However, if the ancestor does not have such a bloodline, then there is not even such a small probability. Arbor nodded. Oh, tell it to stop howling. We'll find another one for it later. She had many small beasts that were top-grade spirit beasts by her side. If that was the case, she would have to find a few more divine beasts for them to advance. Master Silver, Little White Snake has gone to evolve. Do you want to bring Qiuqiu out with you? Your master isn't that weak, the little stoic said expressionlessly. Soon after, she thought for a bit and brought out the blue spirit snake emperor, who was currently frolicking in the 100 Poison Valley on Fish Orchid Planet. The little blue snake was dumbfounded. When it raised its little snake head and saw its little master, it couldn't help but shiver. It shrunk its head like a human and quickly closed its mouth to hide its 2 fangs. Little master couldn't be thinking about snake tooth again, could she? It took so long for it to grow back. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Mu expressionlessly said, What are you cowering for? Isn't it just taking 2 drops of your venom every 3 months? It doesn't hurt. The little blue snake blinked its dog eyes cutely and rolled around in her hand like a corpse. Then, its snake body stiffened with its belly facing the sky without any integrity. Duan Yu couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this. He exchanged a glance with Mo Lien next to him. Were the beasts by Jojo's side also lacking in integrity? Mo Lien gave him an especially annoying look. Thankfully, his Sir Jojo didn't like little beasts that acted cute. Otherwise, These stinky things might have to compete with him for favor. Chapter 30-20. Emolien was about to pick up the little blue snake and toss it away. The little blue snake seemed to have sensed an unprecedented crisis and hastily coiled itself around Auber's wrist. It obediently coiled itself into a circle and stopped moving like a corpse. Auber was amused. He looked down at the little blue snake before looking up at Emolien and Duan Yu. Whee! Swish! Thump! 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 A series of urgent sounds came from the bottom of the ship. They soon saw the little fatty's nimble body dashing forward as he shouted, "There are several hundred to 1,000 sword-toothed fish digging into the ship below. I think the bottom of the ship is going to be pierced through very soon." Everyone was grief-stricken when they heard this. It wasn't that they were afraid. If it were any other time, the worst that could happen was that the ship would sink, and they would just fly up into the air. But in this current situation, with such dense thunderclouds hovering above Du Chunjiang, they would dare to hack you to death if you dared to fly up into the air. Who dared to fly up recklessly? That would be asking for a beating. Thump, 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 thump. The sounds of the ship's bottom being pierced gradually grew louder in the stormy night, causing everyone's nerves to tighten to a critical point in an instant. Holy Sun Mi Yen rushed onto the ship despite the torrential rain and solemnly said to everyone, "Everyone, conserve your spiritual energy and pay attention to your defenses. When we enter the water later, we will need a defensive barrier to support us. Who knows how long we will struggle in the water?" On the side, Qi Xianxian rolled up her small sleeves. "Let's fight it out with them. How could a group of spiritual cultivators like them be afraid of several hundred sword-toothed fish? What a joke!" Crack! The boatman shrieked in panic, "The bottom of the ship is leaking." Auber turned to look at them with a frown. This ship employed more than a dozen normal boatmen. If they entered the water, they wouldn't have any chance of survival. The teeth of the sword-toothed fish could chew them into pieces at any moment. Holy Sun Mi Yen hastily said, "Hurry and gather around. Follow behind us. When we fall into the water later, try your best to find wooden planks for cover." Crack! Kacha kacha! Some of the sword-toothed fish jumped up and jumped onto the deck of the boat. Everyone was about to kill them. Auber suddenly said, "Wait." Akir had long found her an eyesore. Upon hearing this, she sternly shouted, "Wait, what? Don't you see that these sword-toothed fish are about to chew up our treasures? What are you waiting for? Kill him." Akir stepped forward with her sword and cut the sword-toothed fish in half without saying a word. At the same time, a stream of venom spurted out from the belly of the sword-toothed long fish, flying straight towards her face. At the same time that Akir cried out in alarm, she felt her body being pulled back and involuntarily fell over. ACI quickly pulled her to the back, but a young girl from the Hong Fu Academy standing beside Akir was out of luck. A portion of the splattered venom landed on her face and hands. She screamed in pain and subconsciously covered her face with her hands as she screamed. As if her face was burned by fire, it quickly turned red, swollen, and rotted. A piece of flesh from her chin fell to the ground with a plop, causing Akir to widen her eyes in horror. This venom was so terrifying. Auber quickly stepped forward, pulled out a silver needle, and pricked the girl a few times. Then, he stuffed a pill into her mouth and said with a solemn expression, "Swallow it." The other students from the Hong Family Academy gasped in astonishment. "I'm going to eat breakfast. I must eat breakfast. I'll update later." Chapter 30-21. The girl reflexively swallowed the pill, and the rotting condition on her face improved slightly. It didn't continue to worsen. However, when everyone saw her face, they couldn't help but gasp. Her face was completely ruined. Not only was her originally delicate and pretty face extremely swollen, but there were also 2 holes in her chin and cheeks that exposed her ghastly white bones. Akir shrunk her neck in fright. She took a step back and hid behind Yas. However, several students from the Hong Academy couldn't resist reprimanding her angrily, Why are you hiding behind him? If you hadn't recklessly swung your sword to chop the sword-toothed fish just now, how could this have happened? Brainless guy. Jinx. Jinx. Akir was also extremely aggrieved. How could she have known that the sword-toothed fish was so disgusting that there was actually a bag of poison hidden in its stomach? How could it give someone such a thing before it died? Did they think she was willing? It wasn't like she did it on purpose. The disfigured girl covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Arbor was a bit vexed and couldn't resist shouting, "All of you, shut up." She threw a medicine bottle to the girl. "Apply it once in the morning and night. You'll recover after a month." Everyone looked at her in a daze. They saw that the little stoic still didn't have much of an expression, and her gaze was even colder as it swept over the sobbing girl. Her gaze was really cold. This was what everyone thought in their hearts. That girl dazedly clutched the medicine bottle in her hand and raised her head to glance at the little stoic. At first, she was frightened by the little stoic's cold gaze, and then she felt as if a warm current flowed into her heart. The girl inexplicably felt that although the stoic face in front of her was young, for some reason, it made people want to trust her unconditionally. Thank you." The girl pursed her lips, her voice as weak as a mosquito's bite. After this incident, Akir also quieted down. She shrunk her neck and hid behind ACI and Ollie without saying anything else. The boatmen shivered as they lay on the ground and said to Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Sir Holy Sun, save us, save us." Not only were the sword-toothed fish's teeth formidable, but the venom in its stomach was even more frightening. They were just ordinary people. If they were bitten by the sword-toothed fish, they would definitely die. However, if the venom accidentally splashed onto them when they were slaughtering the saber-toothed long fish, then with their identities as ordinary people, they might not even be as good as the young girl and would die in a matter of minutes. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was also rather grave. He turned to look at the little stoic and asked gravely, "Do you have any methods?" Inexplicably, he felt that this little girl, who was full of treasures, should have a way to help everyone out of this predicament. The little fellow raised her eyebrows and glared at him. "Didn't you bring this disaster upon yourselves? Now that you can't control yourself, you want to ask me for help?" Holy Sun Mi Yen said, "Is there a misunderstanding? Now we're all in the same boat." Was he crazy to attract these things to harm everyone, including himself? Humph. The little stoic rolled her eyes at him. "You don't know how to cause trouble, but don't tell me other people can't?" Holy Sun Mi Yen reflexively glanced at the silent holy nun, Nye Yaoguang. For some reason, he had an intuition that the little stoic was targeting the holy nun. Chapter 30-22. Holy Nun Nye Yaoguang, on the other hand, was looking down without any expression on her face. When she saw the Holy Sun's gaze, she bowed and said respectfully, "Holy Sun, let us go down and slaughter the sword-toothed fish." The moment she said that, the few priests of the temple looked at her as if they had eaten a fly. What kind of joke was this? Since she knew that the sword-toothed fish had poison in their stomachs, she still wanted them to go down and die. There were not only hundreds and thousands of sword-toothed fish gathered below, there were probably close to 7 to 8 million of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, not to mention so many sword-toothed fish. The few priests stared at Holy Nun Nye Yaoguang as if they were looking at a lunatic. "Is there something wrong with your brain? Even with so many people going down together, they might not be able to handle so many sword-toothed fish, much less 30 to 40 of them from the temple?" The holy nun's expression was calm. With a flip of her hand, she took out an exquisite ball with multicolored light flowing around it. "You all only need to assist me. Once I keep all these sword-toothed fish into this exquisite ball, there will naturally be no danger left." Whoa! The exquisite ball in the holy nun's hand is a storage spiritual artifact. Everyone's eyes lit up as they landed on her hand. That storage spiritual artifact looked like it was overflowing with light. From the outside, it looked very beautiful. On the other hand, Emolien merely glanced at her before curling his lips slightly and shifting his gaze away. The little fellow tugged at her husband's sleeve curiously. Lien, is her exquisite ball very powerful? The material is not bad, but the forging standard is a little bad. Lien whispered in her ear. This exquisite ball is made from deep-sea cold iron, and there are more than 10 kinds of good materials in it. Previously, when we were forging weapons for Little Fatty and the rest, if we could have 3 or 4 of them, we could have forged their weapons into level 15 divine artifacts. What a pity! Arbor blinked. In that case, the material of this exquisite ball is good, but the forging is not satisfactory? Lien nodded and murmured something into her ear. Afterwards, he winked at her with an expression of watching a good show. A faint smile appeared on the little fellow's stoic face, and he nodded his head with a grin. Seeing that Nie Yaoguang was so confident, Holy Sun Mi Yen nodded and said, "Since that's the case, everyone in the divine palace will follow me down. Assist the Saintess in keeping these sword-toothed fish into the exquisite orb." Saintess Nie Yaoguang was a little excited, even though she didn't show it on her face. She thought to herself that if she could subdue these sword-toothed fish that had sharp teeth and could spit poison, she would naturally be able to kill a lot of enemies in the water in a matter of minutes. She subconsciously glanced at Arbor, then turned around and led the Holy Sun and the others to the bottom of the cabin. Duan Yu glanced at Lien and thought, "The Saintess, this fool, is probably going to run out of luck." At this time, Madame Goen had already shakily crawled over with one leg. That robust man, Huang Yang, hurried to her side and quickly reached out to support her. He whispered, "Madam, I was held back by someone just now." Madame Goen quickly waved her hand at him, indicating for him to stop talking. She warily glanced at Lien and Arbor, who were standing at the side of the ship, and shuddered all over. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., don't wait for me." Chapter 30-23. Right now, she was truly a bit fearful of this stoic face. She secretly made up her mind to avoid provoking this little stoic if she could in the future. After suffering so many losses at her hands, Goen Gua had learned her lesson. She was the dignified madam of Goen Gua. If she could avoid provoking this couple, she would naturally be able to live a good life with a handsome man. However, she had a bit of a screw loose previously and just had to target this stoic face. The stoic face wasn't an easy bone to chew. Just based on her cold and stern appearance just now, even the Emperor couldn't be provoked. If she hadn't wailed loudly in the end and knelt on the ground to beg for mercy, perhaps she really would have been killed by this stoic face. Madame of Goen Gua believed that in the end, the little stoic didn't stop killing her because she was soft-hearted. Why didn't she kill her? Because a coward like Madame of Goen Gua wasn't worth it for her to make a move. For some reason, Madame of Goen Gua had such a clear thought in her mind. She shuddered and supported the robust man, Huang Yang, by the arm. She whispered to him, "How is Mr. Zhao?" Huang Yang weakly shook his head at her. The shock in his heart hadn't passed yet. Prince Amo really didn't give Madame of Goen Gua any face and killed Mr. Zhao with a single blow. The Crown Prince was warning Madame of Goen Gua that if she continued, her outcome wouldn't be any better than Mr. Zhao's. Mr. Zhao truly had 8 lifetimes worth of bad luck. Just because he wanted to protect Madame of Goen Gua, the couple viewed him as a thorn in their flesh. Although Huang Yang felt that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless in their methods, he had nothing to say in response. After all, the two sides had different standpoints, so their opponents were naturally different as well. If Madame seized this rare opportunity, it was hard to guarantee that she wouldn't be so ruthless towards the Crown Princess. Although the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless, they merely struck first to gain the upper hand. Winner takes all. Wasn't Madame admitting defeat now out of fear of being beaten? Huang Yang sighed and helped the limping Madame of Goen Gua to sit down on the side. He warned, "Madame, I'll help you bandage your wound first. When it enters the water later, this blood might attract ferocious beasts in the water." Madame Goen nodded listlessly and didn't say anything. She just let the gazelle do whatever it wanted. The little stoic reached out to stroke the strands of hair that floated in front of her forehead and absent-mindedly turned her head to glance at the Madam of the Ministry of State Security. Like a startled little beast, Gowen sat up straight and shrunk back to the railing. Abba looked at her coldly and then retracted his gaze. Madame Gowen only felt a bone-chilling coldness. She touched her forehead and found that it was full of cold sweat. She was so frightened by this glance that she almost peed. Everyone on the ship was anxious and restless. A few students from the academy could not help but lower their heads to look into the water. From their point of view, they could only see the five-colored light of the exquisite ball faintly flickering. It seemed that the Saintess was currently absorbing the saber-toothed fish. It would be much better if I could take away all the sword-fang fish. Even if they entered the water, they would not have to face the siege of thousands of sword-fang fishes. The little stoic reached out to hold the railing and looked down. She then blinked and shrunk into her husband's arms. "They're here." Boom! A huge tremor stole up from the bottom of the ship. Everyone, who was brimming with anticipation, was instantly stupefied by this sound. They only felt the ship violently shake and tremble. The ship, which was riddled with holes, disintegrated in an instant. Chapter 30-24. Caught off guard, everyone fell into the water like dumplings. Sir Jojo stretched out his leg and stepped on a small piece of floating wooden lattice window. He looked around and saw that Emolien was busy keeping the broken pieces of the exquisite ball. Countless sword-toothed fishes jumped up and down beside his feet. When they touched the wall of fire that rose from his feet, they hurriedly retreated. Xiao Mu waved her hand, and a blank storage talisman emitting a purple light flew out from her inner world. It circled around her before abruptly stopping in front of her. The peerless purple talisman shone brightly. At the same time, countless sword-toothed fishes were sucked into the talisman and circled in the air. Waves of sword-toothed fishes were all sucked into the peerless purple talisman. The flustered boatmen had just thought that their lives were over when they saw such a shocking scene in front of them. For a moment, they did not know if they were overjoyed or overjoyed. They looked at Sir Jojo in a daze and could not say a word for a long time. After Auber sucked the last sword-toothed fish into the purple talisman, she stretched out her hand and pinched the talisman in her hand. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Their gazes landed on the expressionless young lady and thought to themselves, "This young lady looks cold, but her heart is not cold." This action really saved the majority of people. At this moment, many people fell into the water because there were no wooden planks to step on. Luckily, all the sword-toothed fishes in the water were sucked away by Auber. Hence, there was no more trouble. At the same time, Saintess Nie Yaoguang, whose hair was in a mess, rushed out from the bottom of the boat with a pale face. At this moment, she was dripping with water. It was unknown whether it was because of the cold or because she was trembling in fear. Her face was very pale and her body could not stop trembling. Recalling her previous actions, Nie Yaoguang's face was pale. Behind her, Holy Sun Mi Yen and more than 30 god disciples also jumped out. Their faces were also very pale. When they were underwater, Saintess Nie Yaoguang had indeed kept most of the saber-toothed long fishes into the exquisite ball. Everyone was overjoyed and felt that the Saintess was very reliable. She had actually thought of such an idea. And the result? In the end, halfway through, the Saintess's expression changed greatly. The exquisite orb in her hand had actually exploded. It exploded. Holy Sun Mi Yen and the followers of the divine halls were caught unprepared. While setting up multiple defensive shields, they tried their best to escape and were almost besieged by the fishes. It was a close call. Before they even returned to the Red River Canyon, 5 or 6 of the god's disciples of the divine hall had already died. He did not die in the hands of a spirit beast or a divine beast. If this were to spread out, people would laugh their heads off. He was actually killed by the exquisite ball in the hands of the Saintess. With a sullen face, Holy Sun Mi Yen glares at the unreliable Saintess Nie Yaoguang. At this moment, Nie Yaoguang's face was also green and white. He still had lingering fears. She was about to open her mouth to defend herself when she saw the little girl with a stoic face use a storage talisman with a purple glow to keep all the saber-toothed long fishes. What What are you doing? Nye Yaoguang shouted angrily. Heavens! These little things that she had taken a fancy to were all taken away by that stoic-faced girl in one go? The saintess simply wanted to beat her chest and stamp her feet. These were the things that she had taken a fancy to first. The saintess's expression became more and more unsightly. One moment it was white and the next it was black. Chapter 30-25. Arbor swept her a glance and looked at Nye Yaoguang like she was looking at an idiot. Was this person an idiot? Didn't she see that she had harvested several batches of fish from Dukhan River? The holy nun was so angry that she wanted to pull out her hair. She blurted out hysterically, "This sword fong fish is what I want." Ever since she met the little stoic, the holy nun was actually gnashing her teeth in hatred. However, she had been restraining herself and didn't flare up. She also tried her best to maintain a calm attitude and turned a blind eye to the little stoic. But now, she couldn't tolerate this. Why did this D*MN stoic face want to snatch everything? She even wanted to poke her nose into these sword fong fish that she had her eyes on. Arbor looked at the holy nun with pity. She just knew this person was an idiot. Otherwise, how could she ask such a stupid question? Your family's fish? Chao Mu gazed at her indifferently. The holy nun choked. This naturally couldn't be her fish. It was just that she had her eyes on it. Since it's ownerless, what are you yelling about? You want it? Just because you want it, it must be yours? If she wasn't an idiot, then what was she? The holy nun naturally wasn't in a good mood when the little girl looked at her like she was an idiot. She took a deep breath. Crown Princess, then what do you think if I buy 10 sword fong fish from you? She would most likely die from anger if she spoke to this stoic face. The holy nun felt that rather than continuing to pester this stoic face endlessly, she might as well strike a deal with her. She was determined to obtain this sword fong fish. She had to obtain it. Arbor gazed deeply at the holy nun and said meaningfully, "The holy nun is so impatient to obtain this sword fong fish because you want to nurture it into a mutated sword fong corpse fish, right?" The holy nun's face clearly stiffened, but it was only for a moment. Nye Yaoguang quickly returned to her senses and said faintly, "I don't know what the crown princess is talking about. You want this sword fong fish only because its teeth are hard and it carries poison inside its body. If you can cultivate these little things and breed them in large batches, you will be in charge of everything in the water in the future." The saintess looked angry and could not help but say, "Crown Princess, I am talking to you about serious matters. Must you speak to me in such a tone? Not for sale." With a hook of her finger, Chao Mu took out a sword fong fish with a protruding belly that was thrashing about in her hand from her storage talisman. She gazed apathetically at the saintly nun before her. Doesn't saintly nun think that this chubby little thing is quite interesting? Interesting. Interesting your sister. The saintess was so angry that her stomach was about to explode. Her pair of black eyes stared fixedly at Arbor. Her eyes were filled with a dark light. Such interesting little fellows. I can't let you harm them. Whoosh! The saintess released a white light from her hand. The crescent-shaped blade made a circle in the air and slashed toward Arbor's neck. Holy Nun Mi Yen was shocked and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" Arbor looked at her expressionlessly with a trace of coldness in her eyes. She stretched out her hand and grabbed the curved blade in front of her with one hand. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. The little girl's hand was as hard as jade. She grabbed the curved blade that the saintess released and clasped it tightly in her hand. Let go! Nye Yaoguang was so angry that his face turned black. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. This is intolerable. Chapter 30-26. Under the command of her spiritual conscience, that scimitar moved at will and continuously twisted in Arbor's hand, trying its best to break free. However, how could Arbor give it this chance? She gazed icily at that saintess Nye Yaoguang, and the words she spat out were extremely icy and merciless. You! are looking for death. Everyone who drew their swords against her wouldn't have a good ending. At this time, the little girl's toes were on a half-broken window frame, and she was floating on the river. Her plain-colored robes were gently fluttering in the river breeze. Her appearance was like an ice sculpture, cold and merciless. Madame Gowan shuddered slightly. She still remembered that she had previously courted death like this, throwing a spiritual weapon at the little girl in a futile attempt to kill her, but in the end, the unlucky one was herself. This saintess of the temple probably wouldn't have it easy either. Bang! The scimitar in the little stoic's hand didn't seem to be able to withstand that enormous force. Not only did it bend, but it also made a cracking sound in the little girl's hand. Crack! Ah! The saintess instantly felt an unbearable pain in her conscience. She reflexively fell backwards and missed a step, falling into the water with a splash. Holy Sun Mi Yen was taken aback. He quickly flew up and raised his hand to pull the saintess out of the water. Her complexion was pale, and her eyes were tightly shut, as if she was heavily injured. Holy Sun Mi Yen checked her breathing, and his gaze relaxed slightly. Fortunately, she was still breathing. At least she wasn't dead, so everything was still manageable. He turned to look at the little stoic and said sullenly, "Crown Princess, please don't lower yourself to the saintess's level if she has offended you." Arba's expression froze, and she tossed away the scimitar that had turned into scrap metal. "Hand it over." Holy Sun Mi Yan's heart involuntarily sank. He finally understood the little girl in front of him. Whoever came to provoke her, she would kill that person to settle the matter once and for all. It had to be said that this kind of mentality was extremely troublesome. Such a lousy temperament was definitely spoiled by someone. Although this saintess was courting death, since she was a member of the temple, Holy Sun Mi Yen felt that he had the responsibility to protect her safety. Naturally, he couldn't watch as the little girl slapped Saintess Nie Yaoguang to death. If she killed the saintess just like that, not only would he, Holy Sun Mi Yen, lose all face, but would the Sun Moon Temple still have any face left? Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath and felt that he needed to have a good talk with the little girl. Although he wasn't very confident in his heart, after all, he truly understood this little stoic's temperament thoroughly after interacting with her during this period of time. This little girl was definitely not someone who was easy to talk to. Just look at the previous madam of the National Security Agency. It had been a while, but she still wanted to get rid of her. The main thing was that she had many accomplices, so it was not good to provoke her. Thinking of this, Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened. He wished he could shake the saintess awake and slap her. King caused so much trouble, yet you still want me to clean up your mess. You're simply too hateful. Holy Sun Mi Yen was currently scheming on how to plead with the little stoic to stop causing trouble for the saintess. However, he didn't know that the eyelids of the saintess he was supporting in front of him twitched slightly, and the finger resting on her side also flicked lightly. Stoic, cough, Crown Princess. Holy Sun Mi Yen had just called out to her when he saw an attack talisman flying at him. Chapter 30:27. Holy Sun Mi Yen was startled and subconsciously retracted his finger. Then he remembered that the holy nun was unconscious. If he retracted his hand, the holy nun would fall backwards? Holy Sun Mi Yen didn't hear the sound of falling into the water. He looked down and was shocked. He saw that the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang, had already woken up. She was staring at Arbor with a pair of scarlet eyes. She suddenly pounced towards Arbor like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't stop her in time. Because the two of them were originally standing on a log, the holy nun suddenly jumped away, causing the log to lose its center of gravity and sink into the water. Holy Sun Mi Yen almost reflexively leaped into the air. At the same time, the lightning above his head seemed to have found the target of punishment and fiercely struck down on his head. Crack! A bright light flashed in the dark night. Holy Sun Mi Yen was caught off guard and was hit by the power of the lightning. He fell into the river with a splash. The sudden sound of thunder made many people jump up in fright. At the same time, Several students of the Hong Academy also jumped up about 10 feet. This was great. The lightning was like an exploding pot, crackling as it gathered and attacked the person's body. Everyone was like grasshoppers, jumping back and forth on the floating objects on the river surface. Meanwhile, on the other side, the saintess had already jumped in front of Qiao Mu with a plop. She stared at her coldly with a pair of glowing red eyes as she crouched down on a piece of driftwood. She was like a crazed wild beast, as if she wanted to bite Qiao Mu's throat in half with a bite. Chow chow. As Emolien flew over, he naturally became the target of the lightning bolt's concentrated bombardment. Aber didn't panic at all. She just looked coldly at the holy nun, Nie Yaoguang. Tisk. Her cold voice slightly raised, appearing particularly clear under the night sky. So it's a corpse puppet that is evolving. I really underestimated you before. She hid it really well. At this time, the holy nun's appearance had changed a bit. Not to mention her eyes had turned red. There were even short fangs protruding from the corner of her mouth. Tian Yun's experiment began to make progress. Qiao Mu felt rather gloomy in her heart. This saintess usually looked like an ordinary person. No one would think that she was different from the rest. Moreover, she might even be able to control the corpse poison in her body. That was why she was able to release the corpse poison with such precision, causing her body to undergo a transformation. Boom! Nie Yaoguang seemed to have gone berserk. He punched down, and the river water turned into a piece of sky, sweeping towards Arbor. This unforeseen event happened too quickly. By the time Emolien, Duan Yu, and the others flew over one after another, Arbor's figure had already been washed away by that monstrous wave. Saintess Nie Yaoguang's eyes glowed with a crimson-red light. Roar! After a sharp howl, some of the lower-level spirit masters spat out blood and their eardrums hurt. Holy Sun Mi Yen, who had just come out of the water, looked at Holy Nun Nie Yaoguang in shock. He didn't know what to think, but his expression was so shocked that he was almost speechless. Heavens! What kind of monster was that? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly recalled the little stoic's mocking words to him. Weren't these nightcore birds summoned by your temple? Impossible. How was that possible? How could their temple of light, their sacred temple of light, be corrupted by this kind of dark and evil creature? Chapter 30:28. Holy Sun Mi Yen was extremely conflicted. He felt that the little stoic must be slandering him, but he also felt that with the little stoic's aloof and arrogant personality, she would disdain to lie. Holy Sun Mi Yen only felt his entire body turn ice cold, and he hastily kicked his legs and paddled forward. Meanwhile, Emolien, Duan Yu, and the others swiftly moved on the river surface. Following closely behind were bolts of lightning that struck around everyone. Because of their leaping movements, the lightning enveloping the river surface collectively erupted, and the others also met with misfortune. The nether leopard that had just surfaced was instantly struck into the water by a bolt of lightning. The feeling of the electric current sizzling chaotically in his body, was especially satisfying. Qin Xian grabbed Qin Jiu's arm and scuttled out of the water. Before he could say anything, he was nearly struck by a bolt of lightning. He hastily tossed little Jiu out and also dodged to the side. That bolt of lightning just happened to land between the two of them, directly pulverizing a dilapidated piece of wood. Qin Jiu sprawled on the water surface and didn't dare to move, but his entire body involuntarily shuddered. F***CK. This bolt of lightning was truly ferocious. Where's second brother? Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist asking. Qin Jiu sprawled there and repeatedly shook his head. No, I don't see second brother. D***. Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist gritting his teeth and turned to glare at the saintess gravely. Qin Jiu didn't dare to move at all and repeatedly asked, Big brother, what's up with that woman just now? The eldest young Sir shook his head and turned to look at the people beside him. We have to leave this place as soon as possible. This bolt of lightning only floats on the water surface. I think it's more appropriate for us to hold our breath and swim for a while, the two young sirs from the Doe family hastily said. It's all that D***MN stoic face's fault. Zhongli Ji-wei was almost struck by a bolt of lightning, and she angrily punched the water surface. If she hadn't angered the Saintess, why would the Saintess transform into a monster and cause everyone to be in a mess? Enough, what's the use of complaining over there? Chen Baojia shrieked in exasperation, hurry and swim forward. A scene appeared on the Du Chun River. All the people who had fallen into the river sank into the water under the intertwining lightning. They paddled with all their might, trying their best to escape. On the other hand, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and Duan Muqing's group had shouldered 70 to 80% of the lightning bolts. It couldn't be helped. This group of people committed crimes against the wind and openly leaped in midair, completely ignoring Du Chuanjiang's clear order that prohibited flying. It caused waves of thunder and lightning to bombard them with extreme indignation. They quickly chased after him, and Jojo subconsciously started to swim in the water after being hit by a huge wave. As soon as the little fellow entered the water, he felt like a fish in water. In the past, she didn't understand what was going on, but now she had some understanding. This probably had something to do with his bloodline. Therefore, when she was in the water, it was as if she was walking on flat ground. She could even breathe freely without any discomfort. Unexpectedly, a few rotten corpse crocodiles came out from the side and bit at her hands and feet. Arbor looked back and saw Nie Yaoguang popping out from behind her like a ghost. His pair of red eyes emitted an eerie, cold glint in the water, and his viciousness was threatening. Yet Xiao Mu merely pursed her small lips indifferently. With a light stomp of her foot, she shot out like an arrow. Those zombie crocodiles opened their mouths and bit down on empty air. The saintly nun's face was filled with disbelief. Chapter 30-29. Arbor was actually able to escape from the mouths of several corpse crocodiles? She was actually able to move so quickly in the water. Wasn't that strange? Saintess Nie Yaoguang's eyes flashed with a hint of disbelief as she quickly paddled forward. At the same time, she commanded even more corpse crocodiles to chase after Arbor. After Arbor entered the water, the more she swam, the more she found the feeling. Her small arms moved in the water as if she was walking. She stepped on the water and floated further and further away. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "This Saintess is definitely a person with a twisted mind." Her exquisite orb was not broken by Lord Jojo, so was there a need to chase after her to kill her out of humiliation? Previously, her lotus had said that the exquisite ball was made of the best materials, but the method used to make it was inferior and couldn't hold too many things. It was absolutely impossible for the Saintess to try and take in so many ferocious sword-toothed fish. The exquisite ball's self-destruction was inevitable, so her lotus was prepared to pick up the scraps of materials from the very beginning. The Saintess was confused by the explosion of the exquisite ball and couldn't find a way to vent her anger. She actually looked for Master Jojo to vent her anger for no reason. She was simply crazy. Arbor kicked her legs and slid far away. She kept paddling forward. In the vast Du Chunjiang, to be honest, she also didn't know where she was going. Logically speaking, she should be heading towards the Red River Canyon. However, Master Jojo said that it was dark and there was water everywhere. He really couldn't tell where she was. At this time, the Saintess who had chased after Arbor for a long time but still couldn't catch up to her, the blood-red light in her eyes slowly receded and she seemed to have returned to her normal state. She punched the water and kicked the water. With a splash, she rushed to the surface of the water. She coughed twice and spat out the cold river water in her mouth. A pair of pitch-black pupils flashed with a cold light as she stared at Arbor's departing figure. There was definitely something strange about this woman. Otherwise, how could she enter the water so quickly? Even when she activated her special bloodline, she still couldn't deal with her. Nie Yaoguang hammered the river water twice with great force. His face was filled with anger as he let out an angry roar towards the sky. After swimming for a while, Sir Jojo looked back and saw that Nie Yaoguang had stopped chasing after him. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. The corpse crocodiles were still chasing after her relentlessly. Sir Jojo was a little annoyed, so he simply turned around and ran back. He released a few icicles from his palms and stabbed them into the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles. When the other corpse crocodiles saw that the situation was not right, they actually wanted to scatter and escape in all directions in a very human-like manner. How could Arbor allow them to escape? He immediately erected walls of water in all directions, and ran through them without any hindrance. Dozens of icicles were cast down, and the remaining corpse crocodiles were dealt with as well. After the corpses were burned to ashes, Arbor collected the crystal cores in the heads of 2 corpse crocodiles and looked around blankly. So annoying. There was water everywhere. Was she going to soak in the water for the whole night? Forget it, she should return to Paradise Planet first and let Sapling contact Emolien and the others. With a thought, Arbor was about to enter Paradise Planet when she suddenly realized that she had lost contact with Chio Chio. The little fellow's face immediately became gloomy, and it was so gloomy that it swam back and forth in the water. Could it be that this dude Chunjiang not only forbade flying, but also forbade spirit? You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.